started, I just want to point out the excellent job that our Sunday school teachers are doing. The kids that were able to come back with plans and with rules from God. I thought that was very neat. They were able to do that. So, give them a round of applause. It's a pretty interesting job that they've taken on to teach our youth in Sunday schools. I think they deserve credit when credit's due. So last week, when I was going over today's gospel reading, I was struck by a question. Before I get to that, I was wondering, how many of you have had in your life a roommate? Okay. I had a roommate once. Actually, I had housemates. It was in my second semester at UW Green Bay. I spent the first semester commuting from home because I had my classes set up on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So it was easier to live, cheaper to live at home and commute. But second semester, couldn't work the schedule out, and gas at that point had skyrocketed to 60 cents a gallon. So it was getting expensive. So I decided I needed to live there. Finding housing in a college town in mid-school year is not always easy to do. I first looked at places on my own, looked at my checkbook, and said, no, that's not going to work. So I started looking at the roommate wanted things, ads, and I was lucky to find one just before the semester started. I found a place that looked like a good possibility. It was a nice little 3-bedroom house. You count the attic, which had been converted to a bedroom. And converted in this case meant that somebody put plywood down on the floor joist and moved the bed up there. And they stapled butcher paper over the ceiling insulation so you weren't actually breathing in the asbestos, but it was still there. It was an interesting room, but that wasn't going to be mine. Mine was actually a large walk-in closet, I think, on the ground floor. But compared to the attic, it was a palace. Now, there would be 4 of us sharing one bathroom. There would be 4 of us sharing the one kitchen. Not that 4 college students necessarily did a lot of cooking. But there was a TV in the living room that got all 4 channels. And there was a phone already put in. So it seemed like the ideal place, and the rent was cheap. There was only one potential problem which I knew about when I went to see it. And that problem would be the roommates, or the housemates. Susan and Nancy. And there was another girl, a woman whose name I don't remember anymore. I remember Susan because I thought she was a classmate of mine when I called, and it turned out that she wasn't. So remember, I was a 20-year-old man at that point. That was a long time ago. So I didn't have a problem sharing a house with 3 women. But it took a bit of selling to get them to buy into the idea. But in the end, though, I think basically what worked was money, because I was the only person that they had shown the room to that could actually write out a check for the security deposit and the first month's rent. So they were okay with it. I think they also probably figured that, I could be trusted because back then I was shy and awkward and overweight. Back then. So it was an interesting experience. I had never lived with a roommate before, let alone 3 roommates, let alone 3 females. So it was a definite learning curve and learning to get along with each of them and all of them together because, they were the majority. And believe me, it sounds like a setup for a romantic comedy or, a TV series or something, but there was nothing untoward happening. The wildest thing that I remember doing was Nancy and I would sit up late at night and watch The Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder. And we'd eat homemade pizza and then wash it down with something cold and smooth. And unfortunately, that experience only lasted a couple of months because I slipped on some ice and I shattered my ankle. And after that, I had to have a couple of surgeries, and there was a long period of recovery. recovery, so I had to withdraw from school for that semester. And I never had a roommate after that. Nor honestly did I ever really want a roommate again. When you're an adult, or even that sort of adult living in college, roommates can be funny things. Most of us value our privacy and our independence, and the whole idea of having somebody, particularly somebody you don't really know, move in with you, or you move in with them, it's sort of at odds with that. And there are whole books and movies and TV shows based on the tension that comes from the roommate relationship. Remember the movie Single White Female? You do. Look down the dark side of the idea that you don't really know who or what you're getting into when you take on a roommate. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there's the odd couple. They had a lot of fun with the idea of two very different personalities, one neat, one not so neat, living in the same apartments. And even today, when you think about it, 2.5 Men, in its early years at least, was based on that same premise. Two very different personalities sharing a house, except they threw in a kid. Good measure. So when I read in the Gospel, John 14:23, Jesus said in the translation that I read, "Anybody who loves me will obey my teaching. My Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them." And that line struck me. When I read that, I had a question. What would it be like to have God literally make his home with you? To have God or Jesus move in with you and be your roommate? And not in some metaphorical, allegorical sense, not in some spiritual, God is my culpa sense, but in actual reality. In the sense of, I just got out of bed and I'm shuffling down the hallway to the bathroom and God pops out of the other door and cuts in front of me. What would it be like to have one of them as a roommate? First of all, of course, there are the obvious questions that you have to answer. You ask them to fill out an application. You run a credit check. You ask for references. What kind of security deposit are you going to ask for? Come on, honestly, maybe you just feel a little silly going over your rules for them, knowing the kind of job you've done keeping their rules. It would be awkward. Of course, it wouldn't all be awkward. It might be an upside to having God or having Jesus as a roommate. Probably wouldn't have any more nasty neighbors. After the first one or two get struck by lightning in their apartments, everybody else would kind of fall into line. No more going to the doctor because you could be healed. No more late night snack runs. Jesus could feed 5,000 people with a few fish and some loaves of bread, so he ought to be able to do something with the stale crackers and the cheese whiz. Okay, think about this in earthly terms. It seems kind of silly, but it might be cool. It might be cool to have God right there. And God sitting there in your house. You might be able to talk right to him and have him talk right back to you, and you can sit there and watch TV with you. Oh, wait. What TV do you watch? Is it all touched by an angel in Billy Graham crusades, or do you watch other stuff too? Not necessarily bad stuff, but just maybe stuff that you're not necessarily proud of. Well, go ahead and watch, even if God's there. You never know, you might find out he's a fan of Jersey Shore. I doubt it. When you think about it, it's kind of the downside. Maybe, just maybe, we wouldn't necessarily want God around all the time. Maybe we wouldn't feel comfortable with that. There are times when having God right there looking over your shoulder might be a little disconcerting, a little unnerving. Intellectually, we know that God sees everything. He's omniscient. But having Him right there would make it kind of hard to do what we do now, and that's to forget that He's watching sometimes. Sometimes when it's convenient for us, we can set that knowledge aside and think, oh, God, He's not here. Maybe we're more comfortable with the idea of God as a guest in our lives than we are as having Him as a permanent resident, as a roommate. Are there parts of your life that God doesn't touch? And honestly, you're just as glad that He doesn't. As human beings, we have a remarkable ability to compartmentalize our lives. And that's just a $2 word that means we shut parts of it off from other parts. So we have God in our lives spiritually, certainly, but we don't always allow Him out of that box that we built around our soul. You know that box, right? It's the one that contains our relationship with God, contains our relationship with Jesus. It's the box that holds our salvation. It's the place where we put all those questions that we have about right and wrong, what we're doing here, what the meaning of life is. All those highfalutin things that we pull out and examine in the middle of the night when we can't sleep, or when we hit a rough patch in our lives. So we've got that box, that God box. We've got it right here. It's important, so we'll just put it right here and keep an eye on it. Keep it in there. Then we have everything else. There's this box here that holds our family life. Our family relationships. Now this is a pretty important one too. So we make sure we keep that one right here, right available where we can see it. And there's another box. This one here, this is our work. It's our business life. It's the relationships that we have with the people that we work with, or the people that we work for, or the people that work for us, or the people that we serve. This was pretty important too. Sometimes this one has a way of kind of getting in between us and this box holding our family life, so we want to keep an eye on this one. This one has a way of growing. Has a way of taking up more space than we expect it to until we find out that it's just pushing everything else aside. And here's another box. This one sort of bumps up against the work box, but also against our family life. Because this one holds our finances. What we earn, how we spend it, what we spend it on. This one's tricky too, because it can all of a sudden start to grow. It can start to overshadow everything else that we let it. It can start kind of taking in the other boxes. In a lot of ways, more than a box, it's kind of a mirror sometimes, because what we spend our money on and how we spend it says a lot about what's most important in our lives. This one probably could make us kind of uncomfortable if God started poking his nose around in it. So we'll set that one over here, kind of out of the way. And so it goes. We build our lives in a series of compartments, a series of boxes where we can keep things separate and not have to ask ourselves too many questions that we don't want to answer. Many questions that we don't even want to think about. What happens if God actually comes into our lives? What happens if he actually comes into our complete lives and starts to hang with us? I think the first thing he's going to do is God's going to start going through these boxes. He's going to start dumping them out and getting into everything. Because once you love God, once you truly love God and commit yourself to doing what he wants you to do, having him be in charge of your life, going to start showing up in places that you never expected him to be. He's going to start affecting all the other parts of your life, because he's not going to stay in the God box over here. And that's the bargain that we make as Christians. It's the deal that we make, the price that we pay. It's the gift that we give to God. God gave his only Son to die for us so that we could live. When we reach a point in our lives when we are ready, truly ready to commit to him, a point where God is going to figure in every aspect of our lives, from how we spend our time to how we manage our money, amazing things will happen. Amazing things will be done through you and with you and around you. And some of these things you might understand, and some of these things you won't, at least not right now. But I promise you that God has plans for you and for me and for everybody else. He has plans for this church. I truly believe that the plans are not just to survive, but to thrive and to continue to be a spirit-filled, welcoming home for everybody in this community who is looking to connect with God. As Pentecost approaches, the miracle of Easter kind of starts to recede a little bit, but it never quite goes away. I think I'll change my question. I think I'll change the question to this. What would it be like to have God literally make his home here? Right here in this church, within these walls, within our lives. What would it be like if we could just throw away these boxes, knock down the compartments in our lives, and let God shine into all of them, everywhere? Each of them. Can you imagine